But cola nut, chewing, and so having some of these stimulants as part of the diet, and then rice, because there's this long, a lot of interaction with Asia into Africa. So rice is part of the diet, and you see that showing up in the food technology assignment for today, that chapter. We talked about sort of beans and rice being thought of as the Brazilian food. Okra is an African plant, and then some grains, and then these different sorts of different kinds of meat. And the Mande region, so a little farther around in West Africa. Again, rice, corn puddings, that sort of thing. Lots of, and jerking meat is one area, right? Where you have the seasonings that are applied, and it's cooked for a long time, slowly. And then, especially an emphasis in the Mande area, of frying poultry for special events. And as I mentioned before, you have 10 million Africans forced to come to the Americas. And y'all remember where most of them go. Yeah, Iberian, Spain and Portugal. Small percentage here. And so they're given rations even in the ships coming across. And these are two common ones. And you see these in the accounts of how they're provisioning people. Fufu, which is this kind of sticky paste of yams, and so it's emphasizing yams, and typically you eat it with a spicy sort of stew, so you dip it in there and eat with your hands. But that's like a main provision, and then this pulp with rice and black eyed peas and yams. And then the slaves first, in most cases, go to one of the Caribbean islands for what they called seasoning. So for the ones who survive, they spend a while in Jamaica or Martinique or wherever, and then they're shipped off to other, sold and shipped off to other places. And in many cases, there are counts of like a certain amount of beef or pork could be given to the slaves, and then they had time to sort of forage on their own beyond the after sundown and before sunup, and so there's a certain amount of hunting that's clear it's going on archaeologically, and then there are these accounts too where they're trying to, on some plantations, they're trying to control rat infestations, and so they give bounties for rat tails, but then there's speculation, or in some cases accounts of, they're using that for meat protein. And there's an issue about, in some contexts, people have access to provision grounds, and so they can grow their own crops, and they start growing, especially things like okra and other foods to supplement their diet. And so what you see is also this adoption of African sorts of foods and techniques into the colonist diet, the European diet. What was the colonist diet like? I don't know how many of y'all have had Spanish food. What do you think of as Spanish food?
Like Spanish rice.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of seafood.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of seafood. And the way that, you know, contrasting these two is pretty good because Spanish cuisine has a whole lot of influence from North Africa. This Moorish influence with garlic and, you know, sort of pungent and spicy, more likely to be spicy. Onions, yeah. And of course the Spaniards are the first ones to bring pigs and chickens. So there are turkeys here in the Americas, and that's already. And in Africa there are guinea hens and other sorts of poultry. And then the Spanish bring chickens like domestic chickens. So they called them gallinas de Castilla, the castle hens. Yeah. So that's sort of the Spanish side of the contribution. And then the British side, where there's this emphasis, and this comes from the medieval period, an emphasis on meat as being the big thing that you worry about and that you consume more of if you can. And so particularly in British context, emphasis of beef, but it definitely much more of a proportion to meat. And then this real like horror and fear of fruit, raw fruit, which is less so with some of these other cuisines, but this is where you start to see lots of cooking of fruit, and that kind of hangs on in different ways. So what Opie was really in his book puts out is all of these different traditions. So West African traditions, English, European traditions, Spanish sort of Mediterranean traditions, and then also Native American traditions, and especially the particular food items. And that all comes together in this food context for people who are doing what? How are they spending their day? Huh? The slaves. How are they spending their day? Yeah, so a lot of like full-time labor, you can't go home and spend, so ideally they're things that you can put on to cook, and they can cook all day, and you can come back and something would be done. Or very efficient and quick, right? So those are the two choices. And then also, who do you think is doing the cooking on the plantations?
The housewife. The housewife.
Yeah. So you have this cuisine that's developing in these different homes, and that's the point. One of the chapter for today in Brazil is the same sort of issue where who's preparing the meals? Well, it's people that have these other traditions that they're used to selecting foods for and using these methods, and what happens is that you have this genesis of a real American food traditions that are you know, in the plantation house as much as in the slave quarters. And where you see some of these things come out, special foods, like we were talking about holiday meals last time and what it means to really have a Thanksgiving meal. Well, there's certain foods, 4th of July and barbecue, there's more time to cook. You cook that barbecue, that was, you know, some of the few holidays that slaves had, and one of them was the 4th of July after that happened. Revivals, religious revivals on the weekend, that again, it's sort of leave time, church time, and they use that as time to prepare these special foods. And then the other point to sort of keep in mind that there was a really highly seasonal nature to the foods available, and that links into when we expect certain foods at certain times. So, for Thanksgiving, some people said ham was like the ham as much as turkey, or even more important than turkey. Well, the slaughtering schedule for pigs is pretty particular. You don't do it in the summer, so it's a weird time to prepare hams particularly, and sort of bountiful vegetables harvest time, and then December again for many people. Christmas is associated with hams, the Christmas ham, and that's because December especially is the big time for slaughtering pigs. So these are sort of, all of these tend to be kind of meat-centric, like it's the time of meat bounty. And so there's an appreciation for it, and that's the holiday meal, whereas the rest of the year is not so much, less access. But what you see happening after emancipation is continued use and preparation of foods like that for emancipated slaves, use of fatback, which is kind of like bacon, and lots of foods to give it flavor. So this sort of emphasis of pork and bacon and things like chitlins and pork rind, all of that sort of stuff gives you calories and gives you flavor at the same time. And he gives examples of different recipes and sort of menus or accounts, and you'll have things like these stews, like gumbo, for breakfast, because they're still in this situation of, as sharecroppers, in fact, being much more vulnerable as far as their food goes, because there's no provisioning system whatsoever. And that what's really clear is, as he compared different southern contexts, that there was not really much of a difference in the food items themselves. People were kind of eating pretty much the same thing. And that the wealthy people just had more variety and more, especially dairy. And that in the South there was less interest in these sort of fine European foods as they traditionally, as they were then. And then you have these, so what is good Southern food besides, we've already talked about barbecue, we've talked about sort of
anything fried associated with Southern cooking.
Yeah. Greens, sweet potatoes,
Like cornbread. Not shellfish, but like crawfish and that kind of stuff.
yeah. So shellfish, crawfish etouffee, different sorts of gumbo, that sort of thing. But cornbread, again, that Opie's saying that's coming from even, developing in West Africa and coming across the Atlantic and being
A huge thing for my family is like everybody loves sweet tea. My dad's the only person that doesn't.
Mhm.
So, like my family's from Texas. So is that kind of like a South thing because sugar was more like like sweet tea's favored more like down south than up north? Is that because sugar was like I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, living down south all my life and living up here and ordering sweet tea, they're like, we just have iced tea. I'm like, and
Yeah.
like down south, they make like a whole separate sweet tea.
Yeah, and in fact, it's a little weird if you don't, you can have regular iced tea, but the standard is to expect it to be sweetened, which, it's really the Mason-Dixon line. You go far north. I don't know about across Missouri and how consistent sweet tea is. Yeah, I think it's that connection with sugar production, and yeah, absolutely.
It's different. Like in Tennessee, hot chicken is really big. When we lived in Georgia, it was cobbler, like peach cobbler. Tons of pie. Like pie was really. When we came up here, I'm like, no place serves pie, like homemade pie.
Oh, you gotta go to Busy Corner.
Corner.
Yeah, but it's like there's one place that's a pie place.
But it's
Where,
yeah. There's
yeah.
still places near.
Yeah.
Oh wait, I passed
It's not right. It's like
Oh, really? Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just
I've never actually
different.
gone into this, so I'm just trying to buy and there's like, oh, this is
So it's true though. There's less pie, but Opie's pointing out that this is all. It's this African American cuisine that really develops, and that they're using. It's in conversation with this British horror of fresh fruit, but it's also them putting together these dishes, and then that's what becomes a food tradition on that reason. It was parts of that medieval humoral thing where, because I think that it had to be treated and sweetened to balance out some things. And then also, if you're going to take it from Sidney Mintz's point of view about sugar, that you have the processing of the fresh fruit so it can be stored longer and be kind of a food item. So there may be a little bit of both of those things going on. But yeah, so the pie, it really is.
I miss pie. Like good pie. And
That's my
cobbler.
thing is pie. I had this fantasy about this class
Like what
that I
kind
was
of pie?
I was wanting to have a culinary classroom, and I can make the best pie crust. And and to show y'all how to make a good pie crust. Like,
You gonna make us a pie?
well, I should do that. I should do that. When we have the
Before
food
you go away next
presentations,
year.
I'll bring some pie.
We make it and throw them around sometimes.
Oh yeah, I can do. Yeah.
Every time I go down for Thanksgiving, my mom makes pineapple pie with meringue and
Uh-huh.
chocolate pie with meringue.
Yeah.
And like me and my sister-in-law wait for coconut to come out of the oven so we can
Yeah.
get hot. They're so good.
Yeah.
Just coming out of the oven hot. She lets us
Those
get
are-
that one. That's like our pie.
Because it's almost like, it's like a toasted marshmallow, but so much better because it comes out brown and it's sort of warm. See, we're back to chocolate.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it so much.
But you can see it. So like a meringue pie, again, is this sort of like, it's not rare ingredients, but it's just done in this big special way. And it takes a little bit more time, like a little more attention. Something you can't rush through, but definitely for a celebration. you do. So there's this food reform movement in the late 19th century, where it's especially some African American women saying, "Oh, this is and again, this is in the context of Grahamism and all of that going on, and they're like, "Oh, we're eating this horrible diet. It's terrible for us," and this carries through into the early 20th century, where they try to reform this kind of soul food diet, and it meets a fair bit of resistance because it's seen as the comfort zone and the right sort of flavors and that sort of thing. Yeah, and so, and some other celebrations when we were talking about holiday meals. I already mentioned revivals. There's a great migration north after emancipation, and so there are celebrations of homecoming for family members coming back south to visit. Watch night is a big one too. It's New Year's, but it's celebrating emancipation, and so huge feasts associated with that. Do y'all have foods that you think of as a New Year food?
Yeah, we do pork and sauerkraut.
Yeah. Is it supposed to bring money? You talk about
Yeah.
So some sort of
Greens and like
greens and yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean, we always have chili, like when we're watching football, but I think it goes more with football, not like necessarily the whole.
Not because this is a big thing in most Southerners I've met, and certainly growing up I mean, this is like almost required. It's bad luck if you don't have your black-eyed peas, have some sort of greens. Sauerkraut's okay, but collards or something like that. And then usually what goes with all that is pork. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, yeah, we do triple herring in this fall.
Yeah. This, on the other hand, is pretty good. My kids, though, it's like torture, though, because we don't eat a lot of black-eyed peas regularly. And so it's like, you gotta eat a pea. I'm sorry, you just gotta. We might die. But they'll eat it. And again, there's this real emphasis of fried chicken, especially as celebration food. So, how do you see this when you think about fast food today? What are the relationships that you see? I know the hamburgers. What do we have besides hamburgers that are the main fast food?
I'd say Popeyes is a real southern feel to it.
Yes.
Yeah, so chicken, those are chicken celebrations, right? Fried chicken, a lot of fried foods. And the fried potatoes, they're a part of all of it. And fried pies and fried pretty much everything. The salads aren't fried. But those are yours, yeah.
Why is it that Waffle Houses are only in the South? Like, why did that not migrate north more?
I don't know. You know, to be out.
They're not only in the South.
How far north do they occur?
Yeah.
There's an In-N-Out burger.
But like the East Coast, they're like up and down.
Yeah.
It's like the first one's past Springfield going one way and another one's like past Mount Vernon. Like
Uh-huh.
further going.
Because I think of them as being everywhere, but you're right that they're.
It's like one of the stops on the way home too. We have to stop at
Uh-huh.
I mean, I once went to this restaurant that was kind of like trying to bring stuff like that back to like up north or whatever. There was this restaurant called Pork Chop,
Uh-huh.
and they have southern like food and stuff like that. One of them was chicken and waffle or
Yeah.
salmon croquettes and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Having worked in the restaurant industry, one of the reasons, there's a couple of reasons why they don't migrate to certain areas. Like, for instance, White Castle won't open this far south. Why? Well, because there's not a baker that is close enough that will bake their buns to their specifications the way they want it to get it here fresh when you're supposed to. So there's a lot of reasons. A lot of it has to do with like distributors, and some of them are just like Bojangles is hands down the best fried chicken fast food joint ever. It's in the Southwest. But a lot of it has to do with franchise opportunity and actually getting people to grow it into other areas.
But that talks about the infrastructure. So if there's not a baker who won't make the buns, I mean, there's a real.
They won't go outside of
Yeah.
a certain radius from that bakery.
Okay.
I used to love my guys.
Oh, I love me some
Seriously?
Sack of 10.
So it's really, I mean, he makes a very strong argument about how what we think of as really American food, peanut butter too. I mean, the peanut, like the way peanuts are in American diet, overall American diet, it's coming out of these sort of African base and then what happened over the last couple hundred years. So that a lot of this is this African American cuisine, this American cuisine, and so you get these weird fights too. People like Paula Dean and some Southerners saying no, it's just Southern food, and then others saying no, it's African food. But you look at all these different sources, it's really a compelling kind of argument. Okay. So there are ways, this is a little foray into physical anthropology, that, what you eat stays with you forever in some cases. in some cases, your long bones remodel constantly. Like, so if you break a bone, you're pretty sure it's going to heal unless you have some other sort of problem. So that means that your bones are always remodeling, making new cells. And so the things that you eat that are form part of that bone change over time, right? Your teeth, what happens if you break a tooth?
It's gone.
It is gone. There's no, but you don't grow a new one.
No.
And it's really, really painful too. So your dental, the same kind of stuff that goes into your bones, the carbon that goes into your bones, also goes into your teeth, but it's set for life in your teeth. So what you can do is compare the carbon that's in your teeth to the carbon that's in some people's bones, the same skeleton, and get a sense of, are they in the same environment for their whole life, or have they shifted over the course of their life? Your bones stay, your current state of your bones is a reflection of your diet over the last 10 years, basically, more or less. So anthropologists can do that, and then they can also look at these variations in different isotopes of carbon that are naturally occurring, that some plants, tropical grasses, that includes corn, have one sort of carbon uptake of these two isotopes, and then other plants have a different ratio. So it's basically looking at those differences between the C4 and the C3 plants. And then nitrogen is the same way, that there are these two stable isotopes, and they occur in different ratios in marine versus terrestrial. So it gives you a sense of what people are eating, how much seafood versus terrestrial food. So there's one study of slaves, a slave cemetery in the Cape of Good Hope, and we know from documentary information, they came from a lot of different areas. And so the idea was, well, how much can we see through their bone chemistry? What does it show about what their diet was like? And that we know that some were Islamic, and some were Muslims, and some were Christians, and so the anthropologists also looked at differences in the way the bodies were arranged, and the sorts of items they had with them, and who occurred near each other too, because sometimes they were grouped. And over this time period, they found several different burial types. And the African slaves showed this dietary shift over time. So these are people who are removed from their homeland and are moved to a different kind of emphasis in the foods that they're eating. And so those are ones. Cape of Good Hope is down at the southern tip of Africa. So these are people from West Africa coming down. And then you have other slaves that are coming from closer to home, basically, Congo region and so forth. And so not much of a shift over time. And then this other group that shows this dramatic difference. And these are people coming from Southeast Asia, Madagascar, Indonesia. And so there you would have the biggest dramatic difference. This is pretty cool that you could sort out the different ethnic groups by their diet. We could probably do that with our own bones today. This group. Although a lot of us have an industrial diet, right? Bring some things together. All right, that's it for today. Have a good weekend. Happy Halloween.
You said the quiz was online already?
Yeah, it's been open.